I was thinking about this presentation and risk management. I just want to give you the definition: a systematic process of identifying and assessing companies or organizations' risk and taking actions to protect a company against them. And so that's just a little background on what is this risk management. And Robert Smith is going to be kind enough to take us through some of that with real life experience and examples that I think he's going to provide to you. And so at that, I'm going to turn the floor over to Mr. Robert Smith. Robert Smith, please.
I'd like to say good afternoon, community service workers and leaders and staff and comrades. And it's just good to be here again, presenting on this subject. You know, I've been around community service 30 some years. I started out working at Hurricane Hugo about 35 years ago down in South Carolina. I worked with the South Atlantic and Southeastern Conference back then. And I've worked in every major disaster in the North America, especially in the last 30 years. So I've experienced, and I know a little bit about risk management when it comes to entities in church, as been a pastor, a school leader, college professor, and most of all, a community service leader here in the great Allegheny East Conference. And as you know, we have like 6 states and a District of Columbia that we work with in our territory, almost as big as the Union. So we have our challenges, and I'm blessed to have over 40 pantries and centers that we service in our territory. And we have had some doozies in the last 14, 15 years. I've been working here in the state of New Jersey. We've already been challenged when it comes to what risk management and crisis management involves. But before I get started, may I ask if we could just bow our heads for another word of prayer. Now let the words of my mouth, the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, because you are our strength and redeemer. Amen. For any organization, a risk or a crisis can come in many shapes, forms, and size. Advanced planning is the key. The more we are prepared, the more successful in management and support we are in containment. These are some things that, as a practical sense, somebody mentioned to me a few months ago when I was planning to do this session that I should look at the Adventist Learning Community, Module 9. But when I looked at that, it dealt with management and crisis in a different sense. I want to make it sort of practical and sort of down to earth on what we deal with, if that's all right. You can always go back to the module and look at that and read it for yourself. I will bring out some things in the module as well, but not as much on module as in practicality. The key people you need to know when it comes to managing our resources and in managing our facilities. As you know, I'm gonna name 20 of the 100 and some different entities that we deal with as community service people. Of course, I'm gonna zero in with what's the hot topic now is food pantries. That's the hottest thing going. I'm gonna stress that, but we also deal with soup kitchens, clothes distribution, thrift stores, drug and alcohol abuse prevention assistance, disaster response in the sense of crisis intervention, training and mentoring, career training, job training, refugee settlement, health screening, health education, family life, elder care ministry, senior and caregiving ministry, primary care, medical indigent people, and ministry to the homeless and to the shelters and to the disabled, youth empowerment centers, chaplaincy, community gardens, urban ministries, and many more. I can name almost 80 more, as we are all things to all our communities, depends on where your location is. But I'm gonna mainly zero in on what's hot now, and that's food. So we'll deal with the pantries. But I wanna bring out some key people you need on your team to make your risk management manageable. You need a PR person, you need contact with legal counsel if you're a director in the conference office. You need safety and security personnel. A risk manager is what all the churches in North America are suggesting that we have now, as a risk manager in every church to help mitigate some of our risks. We should already know these people, not when the disaster happened, because you don't get to know these people and get things done when the disaster happens. You need to know them up front. And here's some of the people: civic organizations in your town. You need to be a member, I suggest, of local, state, and regional and national organizations that deal with community. United Way, Food Bank, Habitat for Humanity, your VOADs, especially your local VOADs and your state VOADs. And everybody know what VOADs are, right? This is some of these organizations I'm mentioning. This is a conglomerate, or this is a group of them coming together in a local community. So you need to find out what your local VOAD is to help with risk management, to help. They will give you a lot of information, current, ongoing information, if you're a member. The Jewish family, I had an experience when I was pastoring in Atlantic City during the superstorm Sandy. And I got to know the Catholic relief people because I did an evangelistic meeting the year before, and we were turned down everywhere we looked for a lot because we were trying to run a meeting between the Brigada and the Taj Mahal, which is, Sin City Row. And no one would let us rent property for the 6 to 8 weeks we were going to do a meeting. But because I was on the Catholic relief organization, I knew Father. I knew the Father. And when I went to him, his name was Father Ryan. When I went to him to ask him if we could borrow their land or rent or lease their land for 6 weeks, he says, you can use it as long as you have an insurance certificate. But it was because of the relationship that I got to preach against the mark of the beast in his town and got his permission. But it was because of a relationship I had gained on these local organizations: Jewish Family, Red Cross, Catholic Relief, as I said. I'm probably the only Adventist that's a member of a long-term recovery state organization. I'm still a member of New Jersey Long-Term Recovery Committee. You need to know your police chief. You need to know your fire chief, the head of your emergency, your ENT people. And you get to know them because they're in the community where you live. Kiwanis Club. When we invited the kids up from Richmond Academy to help work in Atlantic City doing Superstorm and Pine Forge and CUC, we got the Kiwanis camp, the youth camp, so they could stay on the youth camp in order to serve the community, because I was on the Kiwanis Club. And I was a part of, you ever heard of Rubicon? Anybody know what Rubicon is? It's a ex-retired military group that responds during the disaster. When we had a big flood in Baltimore a couple years ago, Rubicon came with their whole team. These are ex-military guys. And as you know, Rubicon is the name of I hear some open mics. If you could close your open mic, I'd appreciate it.
Yes,
But
I wanted to say something about the Rubicon. Is that
okay, go ahead.
I just want to say that Rubicon also do supplies when you work in a warehouse also.
Exactly. Now you can break in anytime. Just let me know when you're breaking in. Yeah, these are organizations that you need to be a part of now to help mitigate some of these potholes you hit. FEMA. How many know what FEMA means? Or what are you? Do you have a contact person that you know that work in your local FEMA area? And it's because of Derek that I got to know our FEMA people at the headquarters when he would send out SOS. FEMA had so many supplies. Now I know 3 of the guys at FEMA, and when I need something, it's not that I'm calling generally, but I have a direct contact with people at FEMA that can let me know if I can take a truckload, if I can, or if I can work it out where we can team together with another conference. But these are organizations that we need to be a member of. You need to at least attend the National VOAD, which meets in different parts of the United States. I don't think we met recently in the last year and a half, but it's expensive and you have to prepare now because they usually go in these fancy places. So, you know, you may need to beef up your budget to put it aside and prepare to be a part of the National VOAD when they meet. But these are local organizations, Boys and Girls Club. Most churches have what they call Community Guest Day. And if you have a bunch of churches in your area that have Community Guest Day, a Sabbath School Guest Day, invite the police chief and give him an award or a certificate because he's part of the community. Because if you know these people, it's better to know their name personally. I even had Governor Murphy to come to my AY. The governor of New Jersey came to my AY in Teaneck, New Jersey, in Bergen County. And now if I want something, I got the governor's personal number and I can call Governor Murphy anytime I want to. As a matter of fact, his senior advisor is an Oakwood University graduate. Derek Green is his name. And anytime I need something in the state of New Jersey, I call Derek and say, Derek, can you get the governor to okay this? Can you get the governor to okay that? I made a mistake one time and invited his office down and, you know, they got the police escort. And so I noticed that day, half my church members did not show up. And the reason was they saw the police out front and and they didn't know it was a governor. And they saw all these security people and ICE and they got afraid and they bypassed church that Sabbath. So, you know, make sure when you invite them that you have the right people in place to introduce them and you have the right crowd. And even to know the police chief, whenever we have a block party or we have even our giveaways as far as our pantry, we have a directing the traffic, a police officer. And we make sure we have donuts and hot drink for him, you know, or her. So whenever we have programs, we always have police escort, but you don't get to know them during the disaster. You have to know these people before the disaster happens. So take advantage of knowing hospital people. Last week, I needed to get our key workers in the church vaccinated, but because I know the vice president of the Meridian Hospital System, I made one call and said, I got 20 people that need vaccine. Can you work it out? Come on down, Reb. You know, they call you Reverend. Come on down, Reb, and we'll have it worked out. So I took them down there and took them to the front of the line, VIP, because I knew the Meridian Health Group in Bergen County. So it pays to know your hospital and your frontline workers and have a day in which you can help with the volunteer work and go up to the hospital. These are things that are important. I would like to also say another point about risk management. Effective risk management requires continuous monitoring or adjustment. I have every month what I call insurance, a risk management checkup, in which, you know, you don't wait till a whole year and do a checkup, but you constantly adjust because you know the numbers are with this pandemic, everything adjusts every other week. They may change their rules on distancing. They may change their rules on the percentage that can come to the facility that can work in your pantries. So we need to have checkups often, every 2 or 3 weeks now since this pandemic, assessments and checkups, I call them, to talk and to analyze and to format strategies and to mitigate the risks and losses, not just now, but even future losses. Service areas in which we can always update the parking lot, our building, even our volunteers and our staff. We need to look at their exposure. That's an insurance term, exposure. And to get a snapshot of our operation, you need that by having assessments or a checkup. Now, when you go to our Adventist Learning Center under community service and crisis intervention, Module 9 calls it stewardship. That's another word. It's not so much a religious word, but they use the word in the world as well. It's lifestyle updates. And I call what stewardship, my stewardship teacher, Dr. Harold Lee and Dr. Walter Starks, they taught us the 4 T's of stewardship. And anybody know what they are, the 4 T's? Any suggestions? I'm tell you what they are.
I think one is time.
There you go. Somebody knows. What's another T?
Temperance.
Okay.
Talent.
Talent. That's what I'm looking for.
Treasure.
Treasure and
Temperance.
temple, body temple, temperance. So those are 4 T's of stewardship that we're taught in Adventism: time, talent, treasury, and temple. And it's how we use and how we manage those aspects of our operation. And in doing so, and especially now with liability and living in a litigious society in which we live in, we need to be on our P's and Q's when it comes to our knowledge in fine tuning our 4 T's and to update them, not limited to managing things that are new. Since this pandemic, we got some new management. One of the new managements that we need to be aware of is managing loneliness. Some folk didn't know that they could get lonely until they've been locked up over a year now. Loneliness is a new pandemic. Digital identity. We need to be good stewards of and good analysts and risk managers of digital identity. Data breach. Since people are home, they get all kind of shams and shysters and con artists, especially our older people who are asked to go and take out gift cards. And so as good community service people, we need to manage our digital, we call it cyber security. Anybody recently have any situations in your territory? North America is so big, but anybody experiencing in your community a cyber attack, a cyber security with fundraisers? And what about copyright laws? We need to be careful now when it comes to what we use and how we advertise it. Food safety, alcohol and medical marijuana use. Some people, for medical purposes, they smoking them little funny cigarettes. And these are challenges and boundaries in which social media, sexual abuse, COVID-19, vaccine, whether to take or whether not to take. These are unique to our areas of responsibility as community service leaders. Now, when it comes to our workers and our staff, and especially our volunteers, we need to upgrade and fine tune our guidelines. How many have guidelines on volunteer work? You just take whosoever will let you come. And do you follow the protocol when it comes to volunteers and staff people? Anybody using that? Should we come up with a new module or a new form? Because it's so important, because you can get all kind of folk that want to join your team. Judas came to join Jesus' team, but Jesus knew his heart and knew he was going to be a devil, but Jesus took him anyway. But most of us use verified volunteers. Are we using that for background check for our volunteers? Are we not using anything? We just say they're good church members and they're good people. Anybody got a suggestion on that? Ray, look like you're ready to talk.
I have a question. This is Darlene.
All right.
Is verified volunteers necessary for people who don't work directly with children?
You want my answer, or you want the division stance?
I'll take both.
Okay, Derek, Wanell, y'all want to tell me what's the division stance?
I know I have to do it, but I'm doing younger kids. I don't know if all the leaders have to do that. I don't know if I'd have to figure that out and or ask that question and see.
Yeah, and I have asked that question, and the answer I have gotten is if you are working with children, the verified volunteers is required.
And money and children.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, let me put it this way. I have a form.
Dr. Smith?
Yes.
Yeah, I was recently informed by our church secretary by the notification she received is all heads of departments as well as those that work with children and the treasury.
Yeah, yeah. But let me just say this, when it comes to volunteers, say like for our centers, our thrift stores, our food pantries, everyone should be interviewed to ascertain the stability of the person, their interests, and you should at least get a reference, of that person that wants to volunteer. And especially if they're not church members. You get a lot of people want to volunteer in the community that's not members of the church. Give me an idea what you do about that, somebody.
If I may, from Edinburgh over here.
Okay.
We have, most of our volunteers are verified mainly because they all participate with the Pathfinders and the Master Guide programs. And a lot of our Pathfinders come in to help us. And their parents are there also. So they're also verified volunteers. So that's helped us out a lot. Is it necessary when you have outsiders? I would think so. It's important because you really don't know what their intentions are, and it's better, and it makes it a safer place for the children. And we do have a lot of children that help. So I think it is imperative for it to be done regardless. And it shouldn't even be an issue, honestly. If you really want to help the community, it shouldn't be an issue to fill out a form. It really shouldn't.
Let me tell you my first experience with liability. Well, not my first, but my recent one. Everybody knows Sister.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Karen, can you mute your phone?
Yeah, Karen, mute your phone. We hear you. Anyway, everybody knows Sister Minnie McNeil, right?
Yes.
Is Sister McNeil on? She said she was going to be on today. Anyway, it's really funny. We were cooking breakfast during Hurricane Sandy again, and I had Richmond Academy. They came up to help us distribute. Some of the folk were afraid to leave their homes because of theft and crime, so we had to take the boxes to their homes and give them out. So we sent the students out 2 by 2 to deliver boxes. But down in the church kitchen while we were using to feed the people, I remember some of the folk from the division was there, and some of the folk from Texas came, and Washington Adventist University. And so the kids that were cooked for Pathfinders and Camporee, these were like 12 and 13-year-olds and 14-year-olds, and they could cook flapjacks and they could cook veggie links. So I had them down in the kitchen cooking and doing, because they were willing. Oh, Pastor, let me cook. I do this all the time, And then Sister McNeil came, my boss, and she said, Pastor Smith, don't you think it's dangerous to have those kids down there cooking? There's a big commercial gas stoves. And she was saying, they're doing a wonderful job, but isn't that a liability? It really never hit me that I should not have minors that without permission from their parents down there cooking meals for the community. So sometimes, it's best to get a slip and permission, a handwritten acknowledgement from their parents saying that they release them in case they get hurt. Or sometimes you need to check with your risk management department in your local conference. Yeah, always check, because you can't have your kids out there working maybe in toxic areas, endangering their exposure to chemicals and things like that. So sometimes your best workers are your 60 plus people and your under 13. They're more willing than any other age group, but you gotta be careful with both groups, multi-generational wise, when it comes to risk management is what I'm saying, So be very careful on who volunteers.
Can I ask you a quick question? Because
Yes,
our volunteers are essential to our mobile pantry that we have once a month.
Right.
And that's the one we get through the Atlanta Community Food Bank, the 10,000 pounds of food, and we have to pack it. Sometimes we have more volunteers than church members.
Oh, yeah.
And we have pre-pantry meetings, where we already know what our assignments are, and people are placed in different strategic parts of it. So far, we have not ever had an issue with something like that. Now, far as if they were working directly inside the church or something, as members, I would see it differently. So I'm asking, since we have been in this process, do we need to have maybe them to sign something saying that if they get injured or hurt, that they will not sue the church?
Well, let me just say the church has what we call umbrella policy for those who volunteer, couple million, but you need to check with your local conference risk manager and find out the limit and the laws. But I was getting ready to say, as part of my presentation, you need volunteers that are willing to attend orientation, training, for information, for skills necessary to perform whatever assignment you place them in. I also got down here that we need to update our form. And on the form, we need to put this. I'm suggesting that we probably get together with a group, a subgroup, and job description, uniform. It's important that you have on the proper identity, your volunteers, your apron or your PPE. The law says that when people are volunteering or working in your office, OSHA law says you have to furnish their PPE, personal protective equipment or gear, shirts. Some of us have certain caps and T-shirts that we wear. They need to know who you are. The public, as well as those who volunteer, need to be dressed properly. People address you by the way you are dressed. Somebody said if you look down in the dump, that's probably where you got your clothes from, the dump. But you need to look like you are a volunteer, you're a professional. We need a standard of conduct because attitude determines a lot when it comes to being a servant of God. In other words, you don't need people with attitudes. You need tender-hearted people, people who understand, because some folk are in the food line, not because they have nothing else to do. There's some folk that pantry hop, as we say, go to pantry to pantry. But most people, when they pull up in a certain car with a certain look, they're embarrassed as it is. So you don't need people with attitude serving. So you got to be careful. Absenteeism. When people say they're going to come, they need to know by signing this contract, they're expected to be there. Grievance protocol. Discontent when they leave, sign off that they're no longer working with you and collect their hat and their apron and whatever identifies with your volunteer. I'm talking about cutting down on risk management. Make sure they're not alcoholics or they're not on drugs when they come into work. And make sure when the media comes, they know how to conduct themselves in front of the media, and they need to know who to refer the news channel or people that are interviewing them. These are things that will cut down on embarrassment, whatever ministry you're taking up in community service. They need to know you have a harassment policy, especially sexual and what you call abuse policies, confidentiality, conflict of interest, safety procedures, and liability. There's another line they need to sign. Volunteer agreement. They need to sign off if they're a parent or guardian for their children to work as minors. These are things that we need to be concerned with because, like I say, we live in a litigious society. Everybody is trying to make sure that, that they can sue somebody, even if you have good intentions. So any questions before I go in the next 15 minutes? On food distribution.
We do have a couple questions, hands raised. I saw
Okay.
Leslie's first. After Leslie, then we can do Lloyd.
Okay, Leslie, do you want them to put it in the chat or you want them to speak audibly?
They can speak if
Okay.
call their name.
All right, you go. Who's first?
Leslie.
This is Leslie, Elder Gale from the Flatbush SDA Church and MCC. So based on what I hear you saying, then I must conclude that it is very important that we get verification on the volunteers, because you just mentioned pantry hopping. And I've seen that a lot where individuals pretending to be volunteering, and what they're really doing is doing the pantry hopping and collecting food and export or sell it in another community. So to me, what I hear you saying loud and clear, the volunteer verification is a must.
somebody needs to know these people, not just walk off the street and start working, you know. A church member or somebody, and part of that volunteer form needs to have a contact person, so you can know, even if they get sick or something on the job, you need a contact person to call if something happens to them while working in your pantry.
Yeah.
Just for safety precautions, you know? Okay,
Yeah,
who's next?
Lloyd.
Just two quick ones on the verification for children. We take the position here in Greater New York that working with children is in the broad sense. If you're working and there's children around, you're working with children.
Yes.
Imagine at most of the centers, there's children coming and going, so on. On the other issue with accidents, we had something recently. I'm the corporation secretary, the risk manager at the conference.
Okay.
I got a phone call that someone had been injured. This was, I think, on Wednesday or so. Well, I thought it was a couple days before. Found out that we didn't hear about it till 10 days after the fact. The individual was still in the hospital. And so it's important, I think, for them to know there was an accident, particularly if somebody is hospitalized. Let your conference people know immediately.
Exactly. Well, okay, I'm going to spend another 10 minutes on food distribution and some of the clauses. As a risk manager, you know the clauses.
There's a couple other questions, but I don't know if we.
Okay,
Enoch and then Lillie.
Okay, go ahead, Lillie and Yvonne, or whoever next.
Enoch.
Enoch, thank you, Pastor.
Yes.
My question pertains to volunteers signing a waiver. If they sign a waiver and we are negligent, will that help us in any way?
It's such a broad thing.
No.
Lord, you can probably help me on this as a risk manager person.
I mean, a waiver does something, it doesn't protect you completely.
Exactly.
And, volunteer house, but that doesn't help you completely.
How many know about this law, Bill Emerson law, Good Samaritan law? Anybody know about that? Can I hit on that in a few seconds? Because that's the national standard. The Bill Emerson law, it protects you nationally. Before that, only California had strict laws for liability, but I'm going to get to that. So let me rush on. Who was next? A question?
Okay, my question is, when the background check is done through the Adventist Church, are they looking at the national criminal? Do they do a national criminal search? And do they do a sex offender registry search? And the other thing too is I do notice that you have to place your social security number on these forms. And the fact that I've worked once in my church doing this, people are very hesitant about their social security number. But regardless, I do want to know about the first two, the national criminal search, and do they do the sex offender registry search?
Yeah, yes.
Yes, if you do verified volunteer, that the service that the Adventist Church has contracted, they're gonna do that because a lot of abuse happens, and most of the abuse happens at our youth camps and in our, believe it or not, in our churches.
Okay, and what is the length between, you can do somebody 2 months and then 6 months down the road, the situation has changed. So how often is this, a yearly thing?
I think every conference is different, and in my conference is every 2 years.
Well,
a lot of stuff can happen within 2 years.
No, the standard practice when you get it done, they will do a review monthly for the first year, and the standard, I think, division is at least every 3 years.
Okay,
but you can do more often.
So who does the follow up with these churches? The fact that one
is usually the pastor. The information, if something negative comes back, it usually comes to the pastor first, and then he will privately talk to these people because, as you know, this is private information that can't be distributed out. So you have to be careful who speaks to these people that may not come up to par, and it may be something that can get cleared up by them. It could be a record or something that's misleading, but I would just say, since this varies from different states, Some folk are under Adventist Risk Management. Some people are under Church Mutual. It depends on your carrier. You need to contact your local conference to get the updated information, because at every conference, we got 50 some conferences, and it varies from union to union and conference to conference.
I think it should be universal though, for one conference do one thing, or especially if it's done on a national level coming from the division, I think it should be universal. And I think that's the problem with a lot of our stuff, is that one does this, one does it that way. Why not just make it universal?
Well, it is universal, and when a person does a background check for Greater New York and they move to California, they can ask that California be giving access to that record. So the division does have the database, but the division doesn't control each conference office in each local church.
Exactly. Okay, let's deal with food distribution right quick. I only got like 15, 20 minutes left. All right, delivering system. There's different type of distributions, and I'm really zeroing in on this ministry more than any others, because this is the ministry with liability right now. I know all the ministries, and it varies, it's in and out, but let me just deal with food distribution. There's a delivery system. Some of us use curbside pickup. In other words, to lessen the liability, the cars just pull up. We put the food in the trunk or in the back seat, you know. But then in the inner city, a lot of my cities here on the East Coast, we got walk-up people, and they have the kids, a little red wagon. They have the grocery store, the Target buggy that they've taken from Target, and they're pushing it down the road. So you got to look at how you distribute, but it should be prepackaged so they can't come in and say what they want because of social distancing and pick and choose. It's usually prepackaged boxes that we put in the trunk or the back seat. And then we have the pack finders and the deacons that pick up, we call it porch pass, and they go out to the sick and to the shut-in, those that may call in for delivery. And then sometimes with this pandemic, we have to do extended hours or more days or time for seniors to come out. Some of us have operating days for certain groups. And then we plan to operate on a reduction as we give out of food a lot of times, or as our reduced workforce, our volunteers. Every pantry or every food center or every community service center should have what I call risk alerts, weather apps on your phone that alert you when that's bad weather, when folk should not come out and when you're not going to be open. We have what we call nor'easter up here. And then you have down south a lot of the tornadoes. You don't want folk trying to come out. There's a tornado warning, blizzards, earthquake, heat stroke, weather, volcanoes, active shooter. There's an active shooter. There's flooding. There's a car chase. There's pollen. These are things that can help liability. And you may want to invest in a on-call to have all your regular people or customers or volunteers robocall that would text them or call them and tell them you're closed, because a lot of folk may not have a phone or may not have access to technology. So you have to put a sign up outside of your center or your pantry, letting them know you're not be open because of the weather or some other type of crisis going on. And then once you get that posted and the signage or the distribution location under control, that will lessen your liability of people coming out in inclement and bad weather. These are some important tools you need. Like I said, robocalling and doing hurricanes and disaster when there's no electricity. One of the best things I found to help a crisis is a satellite telephone. Now that's expensive. A lot of folk can't afford the satellite phone, but you can afford solar battery chargers. You can go on Amazon. These are solar chargers that rely on the sun to power them, because sometimes you don't have electricity. But one of the best investments that any center can have is charging stations, solar charging stations. You can get, as Mr. Janet Phillips, turn your mic off, please.
Sorry.
Thank you. Solar charging stations is a good investment for those. And then CDL, make sure you have a team you can call on in emergency, the commercial driver's license people to go and rent a truck and drive the truck and forklift drivers, because a lot of supplies can be delivered because we don't have people, if not forklift machine, they got the little portable ones, the manual ones you can have to help take the pallets off of the trucks and stuff. These are things that will help, and not have people, backs giving out and going to the chiropractor because they're lifting this heavy equipment. It will help you on some medical bills that you can incur. And then you need to teach your volunteers how, in this pandemic, to make sure they wash their hands with soap and water. And if they're going to use a sanitizer, because they don't have, make sure it's 70% alcohol, and avoid touching tell the volunteers to avoid touching their face and picking in their nose and stuff like that, and to wear masks right now, because all these things are important. And tell people who are sick, do not come to work. And then if people are sick coming to the pantry, make sure you do not let them stay around. Don't let them come to work. Or if they're in the pantry, have a certain line for people that have certain sicknesses. Clean and disinfect frequent use areas, light switches, countertops, the cell phone, the doorknobs. All these things are important for the safety and the health of your volunteers. Protective measurements should be foremost in our mind at our city, in our centers. Volunteers are especially generational volunteers. Be careful about your senior and your youth. I can't stress that enough. Some places that loosen up, I know in Florida, they've thrown out the mask. Governor DeSantis, he says you don't have to worry about the mask. You don't have to worry about gloves or the 6-foot rule, the 3-foot rule. So use common sense sometimes. Just because something is legal doesn't make it right. Be sensitive, because some folk will stop coming to your centers if they feel unsafe. So still use social distancing, still use PPE. Well, wear your shields, wear your masks. If you can't, wear your gloves. If you're allergic to latex, then just get work gloves. You can pick them up at the dollar store for $1 each. You don't have to spend a lot of money. Sister Betty Ann Parrish, put your mute on, Sister Betty Ann Parrish. Could our host mute them? Our host can mute them. Getting some feedback. Okay. Yeah, mask and facial material, whether it's cloth, and if it's cloth, make sure you wash it every night and dry it out. Don't wear the same cloth mask every day, back to back, but wash it daily. And make sure you have 2 or 3 you can change up sometimes. Clean the handles on your carts or your pen that you use. Your computer, your personal computer docking station. Make sure you sanitize, and if you can afford a defogger to cut down on liability, get you a inexpensive defogger and use the sterilization liquid to put in it so that you can sanitize the work area. And make sure the incoming supplies and deliveries that come in, that you make sure you wipe them down properly before you serve them to the general public. You don't want anybody getting sick. Interesting statistic of liability. 100 million pounds of food is wasted in the United States every year. Estimates suggest that up to 40% of edible food in the US supply end up in the garbage. So during the I call it farm to fork life cycle, we waste a lot in America. When there's 49 million people that need food, and of the 49 million, almost 50 million, 16 million are children. They are at risk of going hungry for a lack of adequate access to wholesome food. We call it food insecurity. In 1977, California adopted the Good Samaritan law, and it states the protocols to protect food donors and pantries, and nonprofits for potential liability. However, there's been discrepancies on both the liability protection coverage, and it varies from state to state. And these are things that we need to be aware of, the legal burden for volunteer groups. Like I was saying earlier, there was a bill that was passed, and the name of the bill was called the Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Act. It provided a national standard to allow volunteer and nonprofit organizations to not be ripped off and to reap the benefits and the blessing of donating and serving food and food supplies without the fear of liability of unforeseen injury. So the Emerson Good Samaritan Food Act is now a federal law aimed at encouraging the donation of food and groceries, provided that it covers a broad set of laws for both the donor and donees. So there is something. And I see some raised hands, and I'll get to it. And since this pandemic, one of the growing industries that has been made real popular is the food truck serving. The food truck industry in 2019 served about 2.7 billion people. That was before the pandemic. And 5 years before that, the food truck industry was only at 650 million. But in 5 years, it grew to 2.7 billion people got their food from these food trucks. And now Allegheny East, my conference, we have a food truck. And since this pandemic, it's mobile and it can go to certain communities. And I just want to encourage for all of our conferences, if you can invest in a food mobile unit, because this is the growing trend. It's considered outdoors eating. As you know, indoor eating is considered still unsafe, but outdoor eating has been very popular with our restaurants right now. And so as we minister to our people, let's be creative, but let's also be wise as serpents and harmless as doves, because there are some folk that are out there just to get involved, but don't mean us any good, because they're waiting to sue and they're waiting to act like something's wrong with them. But learn who your risk manager on your conference, get their name personally, know how to contact them. Don't go for weeks and weeks, and somebody's in the hospital, somebody trip and fall without reporting it to your local conference insurance people. And may God continue to bless us as we look out for his people and for his work in these last days. I have plenty more, but my time is up, and I'll save this rest of the time for questions. Any questions, anything we may be able to help you and answer. Okay, Leslie Gale, your hands up.
Sorry, that was the previous one.
Yeah.
Okay, go to
while you guys are coming up with questions, I'll just share real quick.
Okay.
I'm going to share my screen. So it looked like a lot of questions were coming up on volunteers, and he had mentioned modules in this AdventistLearningCommunity.com. When you go to the Community Service Urban Ministry, Module 5 talks about volunteer engagement and human resources. So that may help with some of your questions. And then on our website under communityservices.org, under the education webinars, this is where we will put the recording so you can continue to watch it or rewatch it. And I'm just letting you know that in June, our next one is going to be on ministering cross-cultural, but also in November, we are going to have a webinar about
somebody needs to be on feedback.
A lot of feedback.
Angela Cooney, Angela Cooney, if you could, there we go. She muted out. It was her. Go ahead.
Okay, go ahead, Wendell. Can you go over again? Because I don't think they heard you.
Okay. Let me share the screen again.
Yeah, please.
So AdventistLearningCommunity.com, this is the platform that has the modules that he was talking about in the beginning. And his was number 9, or that was about risk management. Module 5 talks about volunteer engagement. So you can always go here under the Community Service Urban Ministry, go to Module 5 and learn more about this as well if you have some more questions about that. Our videos our webinars that we record, we eventually put it on our website, which is right here, communityservices.org, under education, under educational webinars. So we will put this one under here. Next month in June, we will have one on ministering cross-culturally, but also in November, we will have one on volunteer engagement. So just look forward to that one as well. Okay, now if there's any questions, go ahead.
I have a statement more than a question. So when you were speaking about when people register, we are using a site called SafeSite. And what it allows us to do is to almost go paperless. And so anyone has a smartphone can scan a barcode. When they scan that barcode, then we have a list of questions that come up, such as COVID questions. And if they are able to pass all of those questions, they get a green indicator, and the person who does the registration gets permission to allow that person to work as a volunteer. What it also does is keep a...
Do you do thermometer checks? Thermometer?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we do that as well. And then what it allows us to do is to keep a list of who volunteered. It allows you to keep hours. What it is, construction sites use this for their construction workers. There is a $79 a month fee, but for nonprofits, they are not charging anything for it. So let's say someone got sick later, then I would know who was on site that day, and how many people should be notified to maybe go get tested.
We use it at the church that I'm at, and we have touchless thermometer instead of having the ones you shoot the arm or the wrist or the forehead because of the infrared light. A lot of folks don't want you to shoot their forehead because they say that light would damage their eyes. So we do the wrist or we do the hand, and then we keep up with people. If somebody is sick, we can notify them. Another way to communicate and let them know to go get tested to make sure that they didn't come in contact with that person. It's worth every penny. And if it's for volunteers and nonprofits free, that's even more worth it.
Okay, Pastor Smith, there's a question that came to me. Are there templates for organizations to use to ensure their ministry is set up correctly to cover all the risk bases?
Maybe NAD can answer that. I'm not familiar with a template for that.
Yeah, well, we don't have one from the NAD perspective, but what I would highly suggest is that they do what you had suggested earlier, get in touch with their conference administration, and they will let them know, if there are certain things that they need to do specifically related to their conference. So I would highly recommend that they reach out to them.
All right, another question. We want a food truck. Where is a good place to get one? How much might one cost? Can we get a photo of yours?
If you go on my Allegheny's website, I have a picture of Big Red, the food truck, and all our other ministry vehicles, and you can get an idea. If we had an organization that Greater New York, if Greater New York is online, they have the hookup when it comes to the showers of blessing and the trucks and all that. My stuff is so old, I could find out who gave it, but they would tell you quicker than I can of the organization in the New York area and the one in Pennsylvania as well, that they would build this truck for you. And I think we paid about $40,000 for our truck. And by the way, if you're in Pennsylvania, I just got 2 grants for vehicles, almost $80,000 in Pennsylvania. Governor Wolf, he approved our pantries, 2 of our pantries, and 3 of them in Philadelphia area. So we received those vehicles free of charge from the state.
Okay, thank you. Valerie, you have a question?
Yes. Some of the difficulties I find, I'm a part of the risk management for our church, and is that getting people to go through the process of sterling verified volunteers. I mean, it seems that there should be a limited amount of time that you give them to do that if they're going to serve. And if not, do we have a written procedure for how to handle those that refuse?
Pretty much, I understand what you're saying, but in my conference, and I can only speak for my conference, I use the people that are sincere and honest. They don't have a problem with filling out the little application. It's not that complicated. But as Darlene said, she has a paperless one that may be not as threatening. So maybe if you got people that don't want to sign, but they will go online and do it themselves, that may be the way to go.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, thank you, Pastor Smith. You all can tell that he's excited about this stuff, and certainly we appreciate him lending us some of his knowledge here this afternoon. And it looks to me like we're close to right on the nose of an hour. And that's what we promised you. That's what we try to adhere to every month. And so again, I appreciate you joining us. I see we're over 50 during most of the session. And so I thank you all for staying with us. And I think Winnell's already told you about our next offering that will come up. Check our website if you have any questions about where and what it will be on, and you'll be able to get that information from there. I think that that's all that we've got. Thank you again, Robert Smith. We appreciate you sharing your knowledge with us. And I'm going to ask if Rebbe Isaac would be kind enough to close us out with.
Sure, Derek, but we just have one more question that came in. I don't know if you want to take that. So for local grants, does your food pantry have a separate brick and mortar building and name?
I think they're referring to Robert Smith.
Is that my friend Natalie Wood from Tallahassee, Florida?
Yeah. Yes, yeah.
Yeah, that's my buddy. We used to be living in Atlanta together. Natalie, just call me offline. I'll give you that information.
There we go. There we go. All right.
Okay, thank you all for joining us, and let's all bow our heads for prayer. And dear Heavenly Father, we want to thank you so much for this information that was presented to us on risk management and policies that was brought to us by Pastor Robert Smith. We want to thank you, Lord, for his team and for his ministry. And in a special way, I want to ask for your blessing on each person that is present here on this Zoom call. We ask that you would be with us in our various ministries as we serve communities around us, Lord. Please give us the wisdom to identify potential harm or risks that may endanger our ministries, Lord. And we ask that you would guide us and help us to implement an effective risk management program so that we may be able to enhance our services, Lord. We thank you once again for everything that you have given us and for all your blessings that you shower upon us, Lord. For I pray in Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Joining
God
us.
bless.
And thank